Continuing with our tales of woe of the lost Eccles pubs, this is part 2. We're now in Patricroft and I'd like to talk about specific pubs, but mainly the Golden Cross, or Cloudy's as many of you will remember it as it's nicknamed Dougie Brown. Now it did have a rich history dating back till the 1870s when this area behind me was known as Catchin Lane. A pub, it was a huge, I don't know if people remember it, a lovely big pub. One of its claims to fame I found was when the Eccles wakes were abolished in the 19th century because they were too boisterous and rowdy, even for Eccles. The land at the back of the Golden Cross was used as the fun fair, less riotous days obviously, and it was a very popular pub, billiard tables, etc., big pub. But to speed it up to date, I think most people remember a landlord in the 70s, Dougie Brown, Cloudy. Now he was a proper character, I loved him. They used to say he used to kick the barrels of beer to make it more cloudy. I don't know why he would do that, to be honest. As I say, I've had many a drink in there with him. There was a dartboard cover in there, which I noticed, and it was the ancient order of foresters used to meet in the pub. It was a charitable organisation like the Freemasons or the Oddfellows, but of a lesser scale. And the dartboard cover dated back to the 1840s, and it had the names of all the previous chairmen painted on it in gold gilt letters. I thought it was a rather unceremonious way to treat it with a dartboard cover, but there you go. I don't know what happened to that. It would have been an interesting relic. Now, as I say, Cloudy's, I loved it in there. It was a proper boozer. With people like Tommy Diesel in there, Tickety Boo Pete, it was Alex and Jake's, the Scotch Lodgers. People may remember them. For some reason, I don't know how Cloudy left and there was other landlords after that, but in 2008, the pub closed. Joe's the fault for you, I don't know why. Eccles had 13 Holtz's pubs at one time and we've lost 6 within 20 years, less. Anyway, they demolished the pub, and as you can see behind me, it is now a car park for what I presumably think is Lewis Street School. Nothing's been built on it obviously, and I don't know the reason why it was demolished, but it was a lovely pub, character's pub, and many people will remember it. And continuing with our tales of woe, we're in the triangle of doom of pubs of Eccles. I'm going to walk around the corner and we're going to discuss a few of the pubs which are still standing but have got other purposes in life, shall we say. So if you'll follow me, walk this way, as they say in all the best comedy films. Shameful. Waffalato. Behind me in the dreadfully named Waffalato, believe it or not, that used to be a pub, the Diamond XX, small Wilson's house. Now, the story how it got its name, with a really unusual name, is people say this, that, the other. The story I believe is the landlord was called Edward Diamond, and I'll just check the year he had it, 1856, which is roughly when these houses were built. He also owned the Star pub further down the road, which is closed as well, incidentally. Now, people say that Diamond was illiterate and he used to sign 2 X's for his name and colour the middle bit in to make a diamond. Well, how would he be illiterate and be able to run 2 pubs? That'd be my question. I don't believe that story. I've not got a proper explanation for it, but I discount the colouring bit. Probably his second Star pub, 2 stars, Diamond and a Star. That sounds more plausible to me. But anyway, let's carry on. As so typical of many pubs in Eccles, it suffered in the 80s with decline of employment, etc., and lack of trade. It was open and shut so often, many landlords and landladies. I can remember it as being a small 2-room pub, a little vault and a room at the back, which at one time had a pool table in it. Now before it closed, again, I read some of the reviews of it people had visited, and one described it as being rough as a robber's dog, smashed windows which hardly add to the welcoming atmosphere, and then somebody put no real ale, as if that matters. The pub's closed. It's a sad loss when any pub closes in my book. And as I say, the Waffle Arto, horrible name. The location we're standing in now, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pubs, believe it or not, all closed, all gone. Behind me is the Dobre Sklep Polish supermarket. Now, prior to this, it was obviously a pub, a Boddington's pub. But originally, it was a street corner pub. It just stood there at the corner of Renshaw Street. A tiny little pub, dated back again to the 1850s, 1860s, when this area began to develop. It was originally called the Rob Roy. Then in the 1870s, the name changed to the Ellesmere, which is a tad confusing because there's the Ellesmere in Winton, a Holt's pub, but that dated to 1902-3. This was here first, so they've got the naming rights to it. The original pub, as I mentioned, I came across a really interesting story. Well, I found it interesting. When they were digging the Ship Canal in the 1880s, a lot of the navvies used to obviously drink in this area with the canal being over the road. And one evening there was a fight outside the pub, just here on the main road. Some navvies were brawling, and one of the navvies, called Tom Yorkie, he interjected, tried to stop the fight, and as so often happens, he got a punch, but he fell and banged his head and died from his injuries. Now the chap who killed him, a chap called Patrick Murphy, the charges were dropped to manslaughter, and he only served 12 months, quite a light sentence really. But the interesting thing was, with Tom Yorkie, they couldn't identify his body. He was like an itinerant worker, like many of the navvies were. And his body was placed in a coffin and taken to the diggings in Barton. And wives who were visiting were asked, did they know the man? The other navvies were asked, did they know the man? No one knew him, and he was buried in a pauper's grave in Peel Green. But that was so typical of the navvies' nomadic lifestyle, shall we say. He presumably was illiterate. I think he must have come from Yorkshire to have the nickname Tom Yorkie. But as I say, he's buried in a pauper's grave, no headstone, and sad story, isn't it? Well, I found it sad. Now, moving swiftly on, the pub, which stood just there, was demolished in '65, and the new pub was opened just in time for the World Cup in May 1966. You may remember we beat the Germans. I only went in the pub a few times. It's a big pub, popular pub. It closed, I think it was 2008. I'm not too sure the exact date, but that's when it closed. And it's now a supermarket, as I say. It's not a great deal I could say about it, to be honest. I'm just glad it has stayed open as a building, not been demolished for houses or even bigger car park. Just go back to the story I was telling you about Tom Yorkie, the unfortunate chap who got killed in the fight. The chap who killed him, Murphy, made his escape, and just over there, believe it or not, there used to be a tiny little pub, a Wilson's house called the Pineapple, and it consisted of just one room. I think it was 13 foot by 11 foot. I've got one photograph of it which I'll show you. It closed in 1910, became a shop and was demolished in the 30s. But yeah, the Pineapple, what a lovely name for a pub. So that's his claim to fame, that the murderer was apprehended in there. Further down the road, which we're not going to, you had the Star pub, that's closed, it's now flats. Paul Quinn had it, lovely chap Paul, I'd like to say that now. A bit further down you had the White Lion, Holt's pub, that's closed. One of the 13 pubs I mentioned before, 6 we've lost. Going that way, Wagon and Horses demolished, Unicorn demolished. It's rather sad viewing this, isn't it, and reading, well, unless you want to read about it in here, obviously. So later on this week we'll be doing part 3 of the Lost Pubs of Eccles, and just, you know, generally cheering you up with tales of murder, demolitions, pub closures, financial hardships. Cheers me up. Cheers. There's a car's coming out, Cal.
Alright.
Oh, hang on. Just let these two go. Right. Okay. I'm stood outside what was the Black Boy pub on Liverpool Road. Right, start again. Yeah. That'll be in the blooper, I know. Okay. I am now stood outside what was the Black Boy Public House on Liverpool Road, a Wilson's pub. Fucking hell.
Stand there.
You film here or do you want to do it in the car park there?
Car park. So easy go.
Cut!